Hello, third grade scholars. This is Ms. Garville, and today we are going to do some writing. We will talk about personal narrative writing. Our learning goal, criteria for success. Scholars will begin drafting their personal narrative introduction. Part 1, reviewing. What is a personal narrative? A personal narrative is a story about a personal experience. It is the true story of something that happened to you. Writing with strong emotion. Authors write with emotion. Authors write about a time they felt a strong emotion. It makes the story more interesting. You can write about happiness, excitement, surprise, sadness, or worry. Elements of a personal narrative. Some elements of a personal narrative are character description, interesting details, setting description, and dialogue. How your story is organized. Organizing your narrative. Authors write the event in chronological order, meaning sequence. There is a beginning, middle, and end. Some famous personal narrative books can be A Chair for My Mother by Vera B. Williams, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, or The Relatives Came. Let's listen. On the next slide, you will listen to The Relatives Came. What makes this story a personal narrative? Listen for the elements of a personal narrative writing. The Relatives Came.
The Relatives Came. Written by Cynthia Rylant, illustrated by Stephen Gammell. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car. And in it, they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches. And up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. They drove all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. Then it was into the house, and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. And finally, after a big supper, 2 or 3 times around, until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras. So a few squeezed in with us, and the rest slept on the floor, with some of their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different, going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden, and they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 a.m. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer.
That, boys and girls, was The Relative King, and it was an example of a personal narrative. It was a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now let's look at the next part. How do we brainstorm ideas for our personal narrative? In our previous lessons, we learned how to create an expert list, which describe all the things that we can possibly write about. Instead of saying, I don't know what to write about, you can always refer to your expert list. Personal narrative topics. Some things you can write about could be meeting a new pet, a special holiday, or scoring the winning goal. So I need you to begin to think about what is it that you will write about. This is an example of your expert list. This was posted on your assignment on Canvas. What we're going to do now, we are going to begin writing our introduction. How do you begin your introduction? First, you must start by hooking the reader. Hooking the reader means capturing the reader's attention in your very first paragraph. And there are several ways we can do that. We can use figurative language. We can use a definition. We can ask a question. We can make a bold or challenging statement. We could narrate a personal experience, or we can use a quote from a famous person. This is also another example that was posted on Canvas. This is your story plan. You are the author. You are going to list the characters in your personal narrative. Describe the setting. The setting could be at your house, grandma's house. It could be at the mall or the store or the park. So today you are going to focus on your introduction, where you give your reader a hook and start your story by introducing your characters and the setting. Your task for today, scholars, is to begin writing your personal narrative introduction. If you have any questions, please feel free to email your teacher about this assignment. Thank you for participating. Now go and have fun. Write your very best. And remember to use a catchy hook.